Good Burger 2 was probably, I would say it's top 3 hardest things I've ever done in my career. When you're up against odds like that, and every film is up against odds like that, I don't mean to make us seem special, it's always the hardest thing ever. You're always trying to squeeze more blood from the stone and do more than you can handle. The thing I'm most proud of about Good Burger 2 is that we never gave up. When you watch the finished product, it really shows. It's like, okay, we accomplished what we set out to do. My name is Jay Hunter, and I'm a director of photography based out of Los Angeles, and I normally work on all sorts of things, mainly been episodic TV for the last 8-10 years or so, but I'm a cinematographer, and Good Burger 2 is my latest project. My visual style as a cinematographer, I would describe as very fluid. I mean, I don't know if I can really pinpoint that I have a very specific style at all. What I like to do is I like to change and alter what I'm doing based on the project and really based on what the director wants to do. So, you know, I kind of pride myself on being able to kind of wear many different hats, so to speak, or like shape shift depending on what the project is. My favorite part of the creative process has got to be the production part, honestly. I mean, I love prep and I love sitting in a room with the director and shot listing and, you know, brainstorming ideas and going through the script and saying that, you know, we should start up high and then kind of drift down low. Like that part is fun to me, but it gets a little tedious and you start to run in circles and you start to just talk about it too much, you know, and I think I get a little impatient with that part of the process at a certain point. I just want to stop talking about it and start filming it. You know, once we get on the set, then I'm in my element. I mean, like, that's where I feel the most comfortable, the most confident. It's like the ultimate kids train set. You know, you're just playing with, you know, you're using tools. I won't call them toys, but you are kind of playing with toys. And what kid doesn't love to play with toys? Good Burger 2 is the sequel to Good Burger 1, obviously. The movie picks up 25 years after we left Dex and Ed. Ed has taken over Good Burger. He's now the owner, not just an employee. Dex has kind of, he's a little down and out. He reunites with Ed, and they go off on a whole new set of adventures.
We're gonna be opening mega Good Burgers in cities all over the world.
From Hollywood to Hong Kong.
Hong Kong is not a city, it's the name of an ape.
King Kong.
The game with the paddles?
Ping pong.
The sound a doorbell makes. Ding dong! What?
I was initially brought into the film because I know the director, Phil Traill. So Phil and I have worked on several television shows together. We get along great, and he's one of these directors that if he just has something, I will say yes to it. So it doesn't matter what it is. If he's doing it, to me, that's enough to kind of agree to jump along. We were trying to get another film made that fell apart at the last minute, which is part of the tough part about filmmaking and independent movies in general is that, you know, half of them, if not more, fall apart before you actually get to start shooting them. And, you know, we swore, okay, we'll either get this one back up and running or we'll work together on the next one. And so the next one for Phil happened to be Good Burger 2. He was hired on it first, and he came to me, and I came to the project in kind of a circuitous way in that I hadn't even seen Good Burger 1 by the time I was essentially hired to shoot Good Burger 2. I was aware of it when Good Burger 1 came out. I was in college. I was in undergrad film school, and so, you know, I was a 20-year-old, you know, film major. I'm going to see, you know, like Godard movies, and so, you know, I'm just in that world. I'm not going to see Good Burger. But I do remember I studied at the University of Colorado in Boulder, and one of our famous quote-unquote faculty members there was a filmmaker named Stan Brakhage. He's a very unconventional filmmaker. He paints on film, he scratches it, really trippy, kind of out there stuff. Non-narrative filmmaking is what we would call it, but he was one of my professors, and, you know, he's this like super high art guy, and you'd never think this guy would go to see a movie like Good Burger, but he absolutely did. He saw every single movie that was out in the theater, no matter what it was, from like the high art movies to the kids movies to everything Hollywood was putting out. I learned a great lesson from him that like a guy like that you'd think would be very pretentious and very stuffy and wouldn't waste his time, quote unquote waste his time, you know, going to see movies that weren't high art, but he just loved film so much that he would go to Good Burger. He would go to Freddy Got Fingered and come to class and talk about them and how much fun he had. And so I remember it from Stan talking about Good Burger back in the day. But no, I hadn't seen it myself. And you know, when I got the job, I thought, okay, this is an enormous responsibility I have to now this beloved movie, this movie that so many people grew up with and love, and we're making a sequel because of the love of the original. So I have to watch it, I have to figure it out, and boy, was it a hard thing to crack the code for it. The first viewing, my jaw was dropping, and I'm like, what's going on in this movie? It was the most bizarre film I've ever seen. It was like watching a live action cartoon. Luckily I just kept watching it. I think I've watched it like 15 times by now. And a few more viewings in, I started to figure out, okay, this is what people are drawn to, or at least my theory of what people are drawn to, and this is what makes it what it is. I think that was the main thing, is to try and figure out, what made Good Burger 1 what it was. So in the original Good Burger, what I ascertained, analyzing it multiple times, was stylistically, the camera was always active, the camera was always a character, the camera was always doing something odd, right, or unconventional. So they were always making choices so that there were rarely any normal shots, right? Which makes sense, because there's nothing normal ever happens in the Good Burger world, right? In addition to that, I just saw a preponderance of wide lenses. That now I think that in the original they used probably every focal length that they had on the truck, but I was drawn into personally when they were using wide lenses. So that was something I wanted to bring to the new movie, was shooting close-ups with wide lenses. That I have a theory that there's two main ways to shoot scenes, right? You can shoot scenes from, and this is simplifying things, admittedly, like there aren't really two ways, but in my mind there are two main ways, that you either shoot something from outside looking in or from inside looking in, right? So the scene is happening, and if you're from outside looking in, the camera's further away, you're using longer lenses, there's a sort of like orbit of where the actor is and where the action is going on, and your camera stays outside of that. And then the other way is to have the camera inside the action, and it's a much more, sometimes in some ways more difficult, kind of slow and methodical way of shooting things, but the difference is that the camera is maybe in between the actors. So one actor is talking to another, and in reality, there's a camera in between them. They can't see the other actor. We have to put, marks for eye lines and everything. And, the camera's moving from within. So I say it's more difficult because it means the actors have to hit strange marks that don't feel realistic. They have to look in places that don't feel normal or motivated from their perspective. You're doing everything for camera. And Good Burger, the original, was very much a movie shot from the inside in. And so I knew that was the way we had to do this movie. And what happens is that when you do something like that, the other downside or the other thing that you have to be conscious of is that it's harder to use multiple cameras when you do that, because when you have a camera inside the action, it's hard to find a shot for the B camera to do that doesn't look horrible or make no sense. I mention this because it's antithetical to schedule concerns, to efficiency concerns. When you're doing a movie, we had more money, quote unquote had more money than the original, but given inflation and the way the world is now, I kind of feel like we had the same amount of money to work with, essentially. We were limited in terms of budget, and what that translates to is you're limited in terms of time. So time is always your enemy. And so when you imbue the film with a style that makes it so that you can't move fast and you can't just back up and have 3 cameras shooting on long lenses and clean up the scene and say we got it, moving on, it just means that everything is just like a snail's pace. Everything just takes 2-3 times as much time. We had to do it. There was no way that we were going to shoot Good Burger 2 and not shoot the close-ups with wide lenses and not have the camera be moving from within the scene. To shoot it from the outside in would have been the worst choice ever. So I'm very happy that we went that way. So the camera we shot on was the Venice, although we did use the Venice 2 as well, and we also used the Komodo, the red Komodo. For years I've been an Arri person, like I've only used Alexas and I've always loved Arri cameras, but I've just been getting into the Venice lately, and I really love it. I don't know, there's something about the high ASA mode that it has on the camera and the internal ND system, and just the look of the camera in general that I've been getting used to and sort of using on all my projects. And I think using the Venice camera kind of became important on Good Burger 2 specifically for the high ASA mode. We had some very slow anamorphic zooms, Panavision anamorphic zooms on the movie. Zooms that you almost never use indoors, but because we had that high ISO mode, we were able to use slower lenses without raising the light levels, which I enjoyed quite a bit. The original Good Burger was shot spherical. The director of the original Good Burger is Brian Robbins, who before that, he and his collaborators were working mostly at Nickelodeon, doing the Kenan and Kel and all that, and these kind of Nickelodeon kids shows. And so back then, television was all in the 1:3 or 4:3 square ratio. And so when they got the opportunity to do this movie, to shoot 1:8:5 was suddenly like, whoa, it's all wide. I mean, I remember going from TV and standard definition, shooting to being able to shoot 1:7:8 or 1:8:5 and being like mind blown. The framing possibilities are crazy. Now that everything is 1:7:8 at the minimum, if not a little wider, I kind of felt like Good Burger 2 needed to step it up in terms of aspect ratio. It was the one thing that I wanted to change from the original Good Burger. I wanted to keep everything the same, except my heart just told me you have to shoot this film anamorphically. And so I had my heart set on 2:4:1 anamorphic. And when I pitched it to the director, he was a little, he wasn't buying it at first. I had to show him some various frames of different movies that were shot in various aspect ratios with different spherical lenses and anamorphic lenses. We ended up settling on 2:1 ratio, right? So it was kind of a little intermediary format that's become rather popular, especially with streaming services, because it just gives you a little bit more of a cinematic quality. The reason to shoot anamorphic, in my mind, is that I've just always had this fascination and love for anamorphic films and anamorphic lenses. Back in the day when I didn't even know that films were shot on film or even cameras, I don't even know what, I thought movies just existed in some ethereal world, even back then, I noticed the difference between anamorphic and spherical. What I was responding to, I think, was like the character of the lenses, the distortion, the elliptical bokeh. I wasn't able to grab onto any of these things in particular. I just knew that sometimes you'd watch a movie and it felt like it existed in a totally different world, like a totally different reality. Why I chose it for Good Burger 2 other than that, I don't know. I just felt right. It just felt like something that we had to do. It felt like the universe needed an anamorphic Good Burger film. The reason we used Atlas lenses primarily was because I knew that the film had to be shot with wide lenses. That was really the big argument to not go anamorphic, was that it's a wide lens movie, and so there's just so many more focal lengths available with spherical lens sets. But that's why I love the Atlas lenses, because there are these wide focal length that you can't get in other lens series. So there are all these problems that you have when you're working with anamorphic lenses that you just have to deal with. One of them is close focus. If you don't get a lens set that has decent close focus, like closer than 5 feet or so, you're constantly putting diopters in, and then that limits your focus throw and range, and the assistants all want to kill me. They're like, oh, I hate, like everyone starts grumbling about, why are we doing this anamorphic? Because it's hard on a technical basis for everybody else. And so the Atlas lenses have very good close focus. And then after that, the other reason I used Atlas lenses in particular was because I love the character of the lenses. Like, they're not perfect, and each focal length has a little bit of weirdness going on, right? And like, if Good Burger 2 is anything, it's weird. Using the Atlas lenses sort of, and the wide focal lengths in particular, imbued the whole film with a sort of like surrealness, or sort of quote unquote weirdness that I think really helped us. Like, it just adds this sort of surreal quality to the film that I think just really helps tell the story. So something that's really interesting that I think people would like to know about how we came to our shooting specs is that the plan was to shoot full res on the Venice at 6K, 3:2 ratio, and 2 times anamorphic squeeze, right? And so in my mind, I'm just thinking like, okay, we'll do that, and we'll just mat off the sides to make the 2:1 ratio, and boom, no problem. I actually own a set of Atlas lenses that I keep at Panavision, and Panavision has installed expander units on the back of the lenses, which basically just make it so that it can be used on large format chips. I knew that we needed some zoom lenses because Phil wanted to do some, I call it the vertigo zoom, some contra zoom. So we get in the prep, and I find that one of the zooms could not be expanded. I think the flange distance on the back was too deep, so you couldn't put an expander unit on it. We were thinking like, okay, we'll just maybe shoot a different resolution for this Bailey zoom. Like maybe every time we use it, we'll just change the shooting specs. I get the idea of you know what, let's take the expanders off of all the lenses and see what they look like, you know? So we take the expanders off, but we left the resolution the same by mistake, right? And so we're looking at one of the, you know, I believe it was a 32 mil Atlas lens. It's unexpanded. The Venice camera set at 6K 3:2, and we look at it, and we have the 2:1 aspect ratio lines in the monitor, and we realize, look, it's covering the 2:1 ratio. It's vignetting, and it's bad in the full 2:4, but within the 2:1 ratio, it's totally fine. It's actually like perfectly edge to edge, like encapsulated in there. We popped on all the different lenses, and we realized that if we use those lenses in, I guess that you could call it in Super 35 mode, if we use that with the 2:1 ratio, we could shoot full res on the Venice and be totally fine. So we actually changed our approach entirely based on that kind of happy accident. We shot Good Burger 2 in the summer of 2023. We shot in Rhode Island, which is a little unconventional. The Good Burger, the original, was shot in California. The film was being produced right to the edge, right before the Writers Guild and SAG strikes were happening. In fact, toward the beginning, the Writers Guild strike happens, but we already had our script written and all of our alts written with that in mind. So Keith and Kevin didn't come to set because they were standing strong with the union, but we were out there shooting the film. I don't want to say it was done hastily, but because of the deadlines of the strikes, and there was a fear that the Directors Guild was going to go on strike as well, so everything got kind of squished into this very short time period. We had 25 days to shoot the film. I think we should have had 35 days, if not more. I mean, it was truly a 35-day film schedule packed into 25. And then on top of that, it was probably the most ambitious film or project I've ever been a part of. I mean, if you go and read the script, every single eighth of a page, there's some gag that happens. There's something created. There's a special effect. There's a stunt. There's a gag. There's like, you know, someone does it. You know, someone gets sprayed with ketchup. I don't know. Like there are almost no normal scenes in Good Burger 2. And what that says from like a scheduling point of view, or from a logistical point of view, is that it's just the most difficult shoot on earth. There are no scenes where it's just two people sitting, talking, having a conversation. With this film, it was just like every shot, every scene was involved special effects, stunts, some kind of special art department thing. I mean, it was very, very, very difficult. The biggest mistake I made on set, and don't get me wrong, I'm capable of making all sorts of mistakes, as we all do. You can't be afraid of making mistakes because you learn from your mistakes, that's how you become better. The one that I can narrow down is not necessarily a mistake I made on set or, you know, with the cinematography in general. It was more that I didn't fight hard enough in prep to get some of the tools and some of the personnel that I needed. And, you know, and I like to think of myself as a very budget and line producer friendly cinematographer. I think you know, I always pride myself. I walk away, I want the director, the first AD, and the line producer to want to work with me again. And if I do that, I feel like everybody else is going to really like me as well, because then I've made, you know, the central creative happy. I've done justice to the movie. It's a long-winded way of saying I'm always very budget friendly, and I'm the first person to admit, like, hey, if you don't give me this tool, there's 1,000 other ways to do it. I'll just do it the other way, right? And so in retrospect, we needed a techno crane every single day of the shoot. There were a handful of crane days that we knew we needed a crane, but it was extremely expensive to bring a techno crane in. It had to come from New York. You know, extra crew members have to be brought out that have to be paid for travel and put up and lodged and all this stuff. Like, basically, because there's no telescoping crane in Rhode Island, it was a very expensive ask to have it. Now, in retrospect, we should have spent that money because we needed it every single day of the shoot. We had two static cranes. We had an aero crane, and I want to say a giraffe crane as well. Instead of having the ability to telescope the arm, we'd put the crane on a dolly track and move it in and out, and we would get those shots that we needed that we would normally very easily do with the telescoping crane. We got the shots, but man, was it a pain in the ass, and it was slow and clunky. The most expensive thing on set, I don't care what anyone else says, it's time. It's like, if you can save 30 minutes in a day, that's worth so much money. And so it's hard to sort of convince people in prep that, hey, my expensive piece of equipment is going to save you more expensive time. You can convince some people. Some people have been doing it long enough that they're like, oh, I get it. This is a crane movie. It's my fault in the end because I gave up on that fight and said, okay, I'm not gonna kill your budget with the techno cranes. I'm just gonna do it all old school style. And boy, we would have had a better time with one. But you know, what are you gonna do? You're always gonna make a mistake. You're always gonna regret something. And you know, hopefully only I can see the things that are wrong with it, and you know, the things that could have been. So Good Burger 2 was all about paying tribute to the original and continuing on the greatness of the original Good Burger. We replicated parts of the set so they matched the original movie. Went to great lengths to kind of make it feel like it existed in the same world. And one of the scenes that we tried to make almost identical to the original was the scene on the rooftop with Dex and Ed. If you watch the original film, Dex climbs up on the ladder, they sit in lawn chairs and they kind of have a heart-to-heart. You know, it's kind of a sweet moment in the original Good Burger. It's kind of like what really made the movie click in my head. It's like real, true emotions are going on there, and you're like, wait, these aren't just clowns. I really love these characters, and I see that they love each other, and they're helping each other out. It brings all the heart to the movie, and so we had a scene like that on the rooftop, and of course we're in a different state, in a totally different location. You know, we had to build it all from scratch, but we tried to make it as close as possible, down to the lighting, down to the placement of the sign, the angle of the deck chairs. Now we weren't like, we didn't want to tie our hands behind our back and say it has to be perfect, but we did make a concerted effort to match the original. And you know, the one big thing that's different is that one's spherical and one's anamorphic. That's one that I'm just proud of, because it's an example of like how we paid tribute to the original, and then we also did something a little subtle that's new, that makes it unique. So you can see Good Burger 2 on Paramount Plus. As far as what I'm doing next, I have a television show that I'm slated to shoot called St. Denis Medical. I took a decent break, unintentional break from shooting feature films for the last 8 years or so, just because I've been doing so much television and episodic work. And I really hope that doing Good Burger 2 will kind of bring me back into the world of features, because that's why I got into the business in the first place, was to make movies. And so, you know, making the movie, though it was rather difficult, it made me miss feature filmmaking. It's what it's all about. Like, making movies is where it's at. So hopefully this movie will translate into more movies for myself and my crew. I guess the most important question is, what's my favorite burger? I kind of like a thinner burger. I guess they call them smash burgers now, but smash burgers are a little too thin for me. Maybe the perfect burger in my mind, it would be an In-N-Out burger. Like, I really like that kind of thinner patty, kind of more about the toppings than the burger itself. So I kind of like the burger to just be like a little, almost like another topping rather than the centerpiece. I'm not a big fan of the big, thick, half-pound patty. I like that little thin burger.